Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the organisers and sponsors for the chance to be here. Isn't it great to mark an agreement in Northern Ireland? But I'm going to be slightly more contentious in the next 15 minutes. I'm going to talk a bit about women in science, drawing largely on my own experience. I'm originally Northern Irish, came from the Lurgan area, and I started my secondary education in Lurgan. Do you remember starting secondary school? All those new subjects? You moved to different classrooms, you had different teachers. And it was terrific, except for one thing. On the Wednesday morning of the first week, a message went round the first year class. This afternoon, girls to such and such a room, boys to such and such a room. And I thought it was sport. That's where they're dividing us. It wasn't. The girls got sent to the domestic science room and the boys to the science lab. No asking, just telling. That's where you went. I protested, unsuccessfully. But when my parents heard that night, they hit the roof. As did the local GP, who had a daughter in the same class, as did one or two other sets of parents. And the next time the science class met, there were 3 girls and all the boys. And the teacher made us 3 girls sit right under his nose. I came top in the science exam at the end of that term, which I was quite pleased about because I'd failed the qualifying. And I think I've been quite cut up about that. I'd love to think the school learnt a lesson, but I hae me doots. And this is the context. So the school's action wasn't totally surprising. This is material from a women's magazine from 1955. Advice to a new young wife. It's evening time, hubby's about to come home from work. Have dinner ready, have the fire burning, have the house tidy, have the kids clean and quiet. Remember, he's the master of the house. You have no right to question him. A good wife always knows her place. Listen to him. His topics of conversation are much more important than yours. And don't complain if he stays out late or all night. What advice? Advice on how to be a doormat. But also what a long way we have come from 1955. And it's not been an easy journey for the women or for the men. All our roles have had to change. Well, it turned out that I was good at physics. I went on to read a physics degree at Glasgow University. I was the only woman in the honours class, and there was a tradition in Glasgow University at that time that when a woman entered the lecture hall, all the guys already in the hall stamped, whistled, catcalled, banged the desk, made as much unpleasant noise as they could. It was a little isolating. I had to work very much on my own. But the next stage was where I wanted to be. I wanted to be an astronomer, preferably a radio astronomer, and I got to do a PhD in Cambridge, and as William alluded, stumble over some interesting objects along the way. Throughout my working life, I've been either one of very few women or the most senior woman in the place. Now, concentrate for this little bit. You need to do some mental arithmetic. My appointment to the chair of physics at the Open University doubled the number of female professors of physics in the country, from 1 to 2. We're now somewhere about 60, out of several hundred. And I became the first female president of the Institute of Physics of UK and Ireland. And that's fairly typical of how my career has been. And incidentally, it was only when I became a professor of physics that I thought again about failing the qualifying. I'd rather buried it. And I thought, hey, isn't there something a little stupid here? And started talking about it, rather late in life. I want to say a bit about women in astronomy today around the world. And I've got a table of data which I'm afraid you're not going to be able to read because the screen's too small. But yeah, there we go. This is international data compiled by the international body. They've looked at the size of the astronomical community in each country in the world, and they've got that number broken down by gender, so they're able to say what fraction of each country's professional astronomy body is female. And Argentina comes in top with 37% of its professional astronomical community being women. And perhaps no surprise, Japan comes in bottom with 6%. The world average is 15%. 15% of professional astronomers are female. The UK comes in below the world average at 12%. If a third of Argentinians astronomers are women, it doesn't seem to me that there's a problem with women's brains. It's something to do with the culture in the different countries that produces this enormous change from country to country. The limiting factor is culture, not women's brains, and I regret that it's still necessary to say that. And if anybody wants to look further at the data, there's the web reference where you can get it. Which brings me to diversity. In research science, particularly when we have an economic recession, science, technology, engineering, maths are incredibly important to help build a smart economy to get us out of trouble. We need all the talent there is. We need all the bright ideas there are as well, and we cannot afford to be turning aside from a fair chunk of the population. A research group in science that is diverse is strong. It brings more creativity, more flexibility, more robustness, more success, because of the diversity and the range of ideas and people coming at it from different angles. However, the easiest group to manage is a group of people that think alike. In our context, that means white males with similar backgrounds. A diverse group is much harder to manage. And the members of a diverse group, some will see it as exciting, but others will find it uncomfortable and threatening. Just depends on your temperament. But that's really where we should be, in diverse groups, with, of course, brilliant managers so that it all works well. I was encouraged to say a bit about how we've managed to increase, just a little bit, the fraction of women in the science community. First of all, we do need to recognize that we're changing society, we're changing attitudes, we're changing cultures in the workplace. And it's not just Pirelli calendars, it's all sorts of factors in a workplace. And we also need to acknowledge that changing society is slow and painful. The journey that Northern Ireland has been on over the last 20 years has been slow and painful. And it's a similar situation for increasing the number of women in some of these areas where there are very few. There have been lots of initiatives to increase the number of women in science, usually started by an overworked woman in her workplace because she sees the need to support other women who are coming alongside her or behind her. Great. Don't want to deny the value of that, but it's local, it's ad hoc, and it's not joined up with anything else. There's been a lot of that, and a lot of the improvement in the number of women in science has simply been due to those kinds of efforts. But it's time now that we moved away from the ad hoc and the scattergun and we had some kind of strategy. And where better than in a place like this to say, strategic thinking needed. Somebody alluded to purchasing. Simon alluded to purchasing. People who purchase have immense power. Check out your suppliers. Are they good employers of women? Public sector equality duty, blah, blah, blah. So a strategic approach, very important. But the other thing that's absolutely essential when you're trying to grow a diverse community is to be able to hear what those people from the different backgrounds are saying. You need to be able to listen and hear and understand their experience. And sometimes it's quite shocking and often it's unexpected. So you need to be open to that. Stereotypes don't work. So one of my important how-to things is saying, ensure that women are recognized and honored as women. Those of us who've been early in a field have often had to behave like we males, she males, we men, viragos, Amazonians. Hell of a lot of words for this. Or put more bluntly, we've had to play the male game because we're in such a small minority. And I hate to think what a lifetime of doing that has actually done to me. Don't answer the question, thank you. We also need to encourage women to apply for jobs, promotion, funding, and so on. Because women still in our culture are a bit more tentative than the men. However, I wouldn't mind if the culture moved a bit towards women as well. I think that's very important. A lot of the programs to support women in science and engineering assume that the problem lies with the women and the scientific society is absolutely fine, thank you. Actually, it's male because it's been dominated by males, named by males, interpreted by males forever. So I think the culture of science needs to change as well. Women scientists, being few, often don't have the same networks, so it's useful to be able to encourage networks. And of course, there are the family commitments. There's still the feeling that kids have mothers, but apparently don't have fathers. One of the important things that's beginning to happen is encouraging men to take paternity leave, as well as mothers taking maternity leave. In Finland, the male has to take 3 months paternity leave. If he doesn't, the couple lose it. Scientists, male scientists who do that, come back better scientists. And if you're interested in learning more about this, I'd commend to you the Queen's University work. They've got some very good programs running. We also need to learn about institutional sexism. Down the bottom of this slide, there's a little bit of an application form, and I've ringed the bit that says gender. There are 2 boxes. What do you guess the first box is? They're not in alphabetical order. Male first, female second. Why? Why still? I think, in my case, several decades of ticking the second box has probably taken its toll. We also need to learn about unconscious bias. Men and women discriminate against women. It seems to be the way we're wired. We need to know about it. And as a final thought, a quotation from a woman at Donne's establishment: "Well-behaved women rarely make history. Yeah, my generation couldn't afford to be well-behaved." Thank you for your interest.